Welcome aboard, my friends. Great to have your company today as we launch, it's the debut launch, I should say, of the Blue Files Extended Edition. Yeah, this is, if you're a regular listener to the podcast, it's an extension of the Big Blue Marble podcast. We try to do the Blue Files. There's so many stories happening in and around the world that impact us and the earth, and sometimes we don't have always the time to unpack it properly through the regular episodes. So this is something new. We're obviously including video, so it's exciting for us. I hope you're enjoying it at home, wherever you happen to be watching it from. But that's what we're going to do. We're going to connect now on a regular basis and unpack some of those other stories on this, what we call the Blue Files Extended Edition. And I'm thrilled to welcome a new team member here who's going to help us get to the bottom of some of these stories. She's an acclaimed journalist, has covered some of the biggest stories, not only domestically, but also internationally, and she has hung her hat at some of the most successful news organizations in Canada. So a warm welcome to Christina Stevens. Welcome to Team Big Blue Marble.
Thank you so much, Anwar. This is such an exciting opportunity. I can't wait till we get chatting about all of these developments in really helping save the world, I guess.
Ultimately, that's the goal of the podcast. You're right, is to inspire people to let's help get together and save our planet. And, every story, there's another connection. And I think that's what we're going to start with today. So I want to begin on this very first edition of the Blue Files out in San Diego, California, where history was made, an effort to protect endangered species.
Yes, at the San Diego Zoo, they have given coronavirus vaccines to 9 great apes. 5 of them are something called bonobos, not too familiar with them, and 4 are orangutans. So what happened is in January at their safari park, the San Diego Zoo Safari Park, they had 8 gorillas come down with coronavirus. They had symptoms like you'd see in people: coughing, shortness of breath, some suppressed appetite, that kind of thing. They did, in fact, have COVID, and they had gotten it from a zookeeper, as it turns out, despite masking, all of that kind of thing. So they're trying to see if they have a vaccine that was developed by a veterinary pharmaceutical company to see if it would work on these great apes.
So it's so important to note, this is not the same vaccine that humans are getting. This is a new variant that they're specifically going to be utilizing for animals, in this case, the great apes at the San Diego Zoo. So have researchers defined the parameters of this? Will this now sort of lead a pathway to an animal vaccine overall?
That's the idea. So they're going to be going back. They're going to be taking blood tests from these animals to see if, in fact, they're developing the antibodies. By the way, just if you're wondering how they do that, is they distract them with treats when they're getting those shots, which is good. It works for humans too. If it works, of course, they're looking, and how this kind of started was with dogs and cats, pets. Yeah. We don't want, our pets to be sick. We don't want that in the house. So it's dogs, cats, and mink. You probably heard about, particularly in Europe, they had to cull millions of mink. Others died from this. So that's sort of what they're looking at as far as other species. And they're very optimistic because they say these vaccines aren't developed really animal specific or species specific, but more disease specific.
And it's important to note, you mentioned the mink. Yes, there are many animals now that have been documented that they believe has been transferred from humans. When we talk about COVID, in particular this virus, it's a zoonotic disease. And for our listeners, you may be familiar with episode 14. We talked about nature's backlash, and we had Felisa Keesing on, an ecologist and educator. And she was saying, this likely is just the beginning of other pandemics that may unfold. So the transfer from animals to humans. But this is also about endangered species. And I think that's the takeaway here. They're critically endangered. We've done a lot of coverage on gorillas. We did a live podcast actually right at the Toronto Zoo in the gorilla habitat. So this is really important.
Exactly. There are only about just over 1,000 mountain gorillas left on the entire planet. Talk about an endangered species. So imagine if this swept through and that would be the end. That's why this is so important. It could be saving an entire species.
Well, and also the idea behind it ultimately is to stop the transfer right? Because,
That too, of
where's
course.
that line? So this is something that is still unexplored territory, much like even the vaccinations for humans that we're dealing with here in Canada and the U.S. There's certainly some very, steadfast research that's indicating it is quite successful, but there's going to be new things that are going to be learned with that. So this is definitely a great step in the right direction when it comes to protecting also wildlife. So good stuff on that. We're going to switch gears and go from great apes to the great power, I think, that consumers have, Christina. And that's something we've talked about here as well. Ultimately, I think consumers can dictate the marketplace. If we, demand change from some companies and organizations to be more sustainable, and if we say we're not going to buy that product as a result, they're going to listen. But this is something new that I wanted to share with you. It's the climate neutral certified labels. So it's a climate neutral label that an organization is planted the seed of. And they're a nonprofit called Climate Neutral. And they're hoping that by implementing the certification that brands will adopt, I should say, and there are about 100 that have already started to do so, it will make it easy for consumers. And they're hoping the success will almost be on par of free trade coffee, the movement there. When it first began, there was a lot unknown. We just got our Java and thought, hey, I'm happy I paid for my coffee. But there was a real price ultimately to the coffee growers. So they're hoping that this movement will also become as successful, that as consumers will be in tune to this, we'll look for that certification and be happy that we are now supporting an organization, a company, a brand that wants to be more sustainable. There were some studies that suggested recently in North America about 70% of consumers do look at the sustainability. More so for millennials, for the younger generation, but I think it's a great step in the right direction.
And what about, we hear always about the carbon offset programs. Is it
Right.
something, how does it work with that?
It is like that, and certainly many governments have implemented that. The takeaway from this is it's also at the consumer level. So it's not only about offsetting your carbon emissions as a corporate brand, but now you're taking it down to the grassroots. The consumers are now going to, in essence, really inspire corporations to want to do it. So it's not only, X, Y, and Z producing so many carbon emissions a year, and we're going to buy credits now. It's about ultimately through this organization, they have a loose-based formula that you can tabulate what your corporation emits. And you can certainly do offset credits, but you're working towards a goal now of, at the end of it all, to really reducing in production. So it comes down to completely carbon neutral. And I think it also is going to level the playing field in terms of competition. Now you're going to get brands that may not be quite as big, but are saying, hey, we're quite sustainable. So this is now going to egg on other corporations of saying, hey, we need to compete now, so we're going to have to do that.
I think at this point in time, there would be a lot of buy-in. The biggest challenge I find with these kinds of labels is that there are so many. Sometimes you go to buy something and there are, six, 7 different symbols, and you almost have to do some research to know what they mean and which ones are programs like this, which seem
Right.
Not for profit, all
Or are
encompassing,
accurate.
versus, yes, that's what I was going to say, or developed,
Yeah.
by the corporation themselves, to be a
Yeah.
little flattering, if you know what I mean. So
I think
it'll
you're
be
right.
interesting to see how that one goes.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think that is what this company is trying to do, is to be the first out of the gate in terms of they're very credible, but they've set the benchmark when it comes to sustainability, because there are so many, and we're going to do this on our podcast talking about greenwashing. A lot of companies have said, oh yes, we're doing it, but when you peel away the layers, well, are you really doing it? Is it really having an impact? But that's something we'll certainly keep an eye on. So we're going to go from that to, this is, I think, a fascinating idea here, and it's produce by post. So, forget farm to table. This is now farm to your mailbox. So tell me about this.
Well, the World Wildlife Fund has a section that looks at marketplace ideas, how to help the world through different business ideas, that kind of thing. And one that they're floating is, hey, get all your fresh produce straight from the farm from the mail. This is in the US, so we're talking US Postal Service, but basically they're saying a lot of farmers want to take part in these direct to consumer projects, but the problem is they need a whole infrastructure themselves. They need to set up the website, they have to worry about delivery, whereas the Postal Service has all of that. Now, this came up because of all the more food that was wasted once coronavirus began because of all the supply chain issues, that kind of thing.
Right.
So much food was thrown out, and what do you do with it? So they're saying, there is a way, there is a reach. And they've looked, I would think it's so far to get to cities from farms, but they have had a look geographically, and it's doable. It really is doable.
Well, the reality is, everybody by and large is getting postal delivery in some regard. So that is, it's on their route, and I guess it's really about logistics. So I'm imagining here, your postal carrier would be getting, the mail from the depot, and then perhaps make a second stop, pick up the produce orders that would be in his or her route. And then it would just literally be, as I drop a bill off, I also have your tomatoes and maybe some corn, right?
Exactly. And they're really the few that go to so many addresses that, a courier
already, they're already doing it.
Exactly. They're there. And hey, they need the business with the changing world, people aren't sending letters and things by traditional mail anymore.
I think that's a really good point. Without question, everything is done digitally for the most part, except, like what we're seeing here in Canada, parcel delivery makes up the bulk now of the business when it comes to Canada Post. So I think this is a great idea. Do you think it could work in Canada, though? I mean, we, of course, are blessed with many seasons. Now there's some adaptation of doing greenhouse so you can grow year-round. Do you think it would work here?
I think that's the challenge. I mean, you look at the US, they have California, they have Florida. They can get a much bigger variety of different produce, different seasons. Canada, we have fewer people, larger land area, and less warm weather. Plus, I have to add a dig. We have Canada Post. Is it really good?
Oh, no. Did you go there?
It was waiting. It was just waiting. It'll be 2 months later. Here's my produce. No, I am just kidding.
I think that is part of the thing, though. I think you're right. All kidding aside, the idea is that it would have to be done in a timely fashion. That's just it. It's a perishable good. I was going over some stats. I was just floored that 58% of the food that's produced in Canada is lost each year, and it's about $49 billion to the Canadian economy. And then the side note to that is, all of this produce that is being grown, there's also the environmental impact, the tons of carbon dioxide equivalent emissions. So not only, yes, we have to grow food to eat, to feed people, but it's wasted, and then it's also impacting the environment. So I think, some great minds need to circle around with this, Christina, and explore it, even if not only on a trial basis, because there are many people, and that's why we've seen that with the pandemic, the need for food, food security is very important more now than ever. There are many families that can't afford nutritious meals.
There's a lot of buy-in here. I think people love getting things, directly delivered to their door. Yeah. Right now, so many of them, they're corporations, they're privately run, they're organic food, which is amazing and wonderful, but it's very expensive, especially if you have a family. So this maybe would change that. And I was looking, there are so many options out there. If you just Google, delivery fresh produce Canada, there are a number of government organizations and not-for-profit that list some of the more affordable options out there that exist right now and might be an option versus some of the very, very pricey ones. And again, about buy-in, a lot of new condos that they're building in Toronto, Vancouver, they're actually building in cold room storage specifically for fresh delivery. So they're looking toward the future, and they don't do those things lightly. So there's some demand for it for sure.
Well, that's fantastic. We're going to post that link, by the way, that you just gave. It'll be on the show notes. And we want to thank you, Christina. This has been a lot of fun.
It has been. Thank you so much.
So
Look forward to the next one.
Yeah, me too. Me too. We'll continue to deliver these stories. So thanks again. Christina Stevens joining us here on the Blue Files, the extended edition. Folks, as we wrap up, please give us a like and, of course, subscribe. Don't forget to give a listen to the podcast itself at bigbluemarble.earth. I'm Anwar Knight, wishing you a great day on the Big Blue Marble.